Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here again with Tom. Thanks for being with us, Tom. Today I have a few questions. Today I have them written down on my cards to keep them simple. But Tom, maybe if you could just introduce yourself briefly and tell us who you are.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Tom Brown. I'm one of the co-founders at Anthropic, where I work on our core LLM training. And before that, I was at OpenAI, where I led engineering for GPT-3 before our team left to found Anthropic.
And created Anthropic. And congratulations for the recent benchmarks on Claude 3, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But before I got there, maybe you have a particular mission and vision at Anthropic, and you have been approaching Gen AI and AI in general in a little bit of a different way. Maybe you can tell us about that mission and vision as well, Tom. I find it fascinating.
Totally, yeah. So at Anthropic, our mission is to build trustworthy AI that benefits all of humanity. And so the way that we've been doing that has been building frontier language models, doing research on how to make them better, and then deploying it through our partnerships like Amazon and with our various products.
That's awesome. And on the performance of Claude 3, so I was talking about the performance of Claude 3 earlier. The benchmarks, I think all of the people in this room have probably seen them on social media. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about that performance and then maybe how you got there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so maybe I could talk through kind of like the three models.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so there's three models in the Claude 3 family. Kind of our thinking behind that was just that like one model isn't going to be the right model for everything that people are building. And so Opus is our like most capable model. It's like I guess it's like at the top of the benchmarks for various different things. I think as of like last week, it was top of LMSys too, which is like the first time a model has beaten GPT-4 on like the blind taste test kind of thing for like chat interfaces.
Okay.
And broadly, it's just like it's very good at like fine instruction following. Like if you need it to kind of like reason about something before answering it. Coding, like all of those types of things that I don't know, kind of are just like you need a smarter model for.
So that's Opus.
That's Opus.
Okay.
Sonnet is our like medium model, and it's basically like a good balance between like as smart as possible and like as cheap and fast as possible. And then Haiku is our like smallest, fastest model, which is like I guess like folks will for that one we tried to make it like as like smart enough to do like most tasks that people want, so like smarter than GPT 3.5 Turbo while being as cheap as possible. So it's about half the price as 3.5.
So it's 3 times better and twice as cheap.
It's hard to measure like how much better it is,
Okay.
but like notably better than 3.5 Turbo, but half the price.
So on the engineering side, what do you have to do to make a model that good?
There's like a lot of different things where I think kind of like different ingredients for that are like I guess like kind of like price performance is the way I kind of think about it.
Yeah.
And the things that contribute to that are like engineering on the like training and inference side that like can get you more efficiency.
Okay.
The like hardware that you run on too, and like that has to be, your engineering will be specific to the hardware that you run on, and then the algorithmic innovations that you put in your model, where like these modern models are like descendants of the like original transformer family, like what we did for GPT-3, but like quite different in both like how they work internally and how they were trained.
And so if you think of Claude, how does it differ from other LLM models out there?
Yeah.
Because I think for many of us, at least for me, sometimes it's hard to understand the differences, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think The models that we're most similar to are the OpenAI models. Like a lot of us are OpenAI alumni, not that surprising. The main differences I think for us have been like trying to make the models as trustworthy, reliable as possible. And then I think the like the price performance is like a place where there's like we've put a lot of effort into, and I think that shows with this new round of models.
So you talked about Opus, you talked about Sonnet, you talked about HiQ, right? I think I have them categorized, right?
Yeah.
What I talked this morning, and you were there. I talked in my in my introduction. I talked about choice, right? And we think, and this comes from the feedback of our customers, that choice is extremely important. Was that choice that was behind the idea of you providing 3 models?
100%, yeah. We're like I think for a lot of customers, like the workflow that before this we had 2 models. So we had Claude 2 and Claude Instant, and what we would see is that people would start out with the smartest model, and then if like get something working when you're first just playing around, it like you don't care that much about cost.
Yeah.
Like because you're just playing around.
You just do it a few times and
do it, and there's like I don't know if the model costs like $5 for 1 million tokens, like you're not going to use 1 million tokens, and even if you did, it would be $5.
Yeah.
So people would like when they're testing things out, experimenting, use the biggest model, and then once they have this like approaching production and like the like price, like if it starts to become like high, then people would want to use the smaller model and see if it works. Okay. And so we basically just extended that with 3 models now, where like that lets people more finely tune like the balance between intelligence, speed, and cost.
And it's crazy because we're only in the first few months of 2024 in April, and we definitely saw, and for most of you out there, we definitely saw 2023 as the year of proof of concepts and trying things around. And since the beginning of 2024, many of those use cases have now been going into production, and that's great to see. One of the things, obviously, we talk a lot about when we talk with Anthropic is the fact that you have a huge sense of responsibility in the way you're approaching AI, and you're putting guardrails and rules. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it's a huge difference in the way you approach it.
Yeah. So I think like one thing that we've been doing, like I guess maybe there's like 3 different areas that I could talk about. One is like the model itself, and I think for that. Previous versions of our models had, and I think everybody has had kind of like challenges with like you want the model to not do anything that would like embarrass the customer who's using it. Yep. And like customers like want to make sure that their model is not going to do anything embarrassing, but you also don't want the model to like annoyingly refuse like a harmless thing. And so that's somewhere where we put a lot of effort, was making sure that like we reduced the like false refusals as much as we could. Okay. So that's kind of one area.
First bit. Mm-hmm.
Another area is like the like guardrails, which like a customer can tune to make the model like have more fine-grained guarantees about how the model will behave. And that's actually a place where like Amazon, I think, has been leading the way. Like Amazon has the like guardrails product right now, which I think is a fantastic way for folks to like get that extra layer of security and trustworthiness. Okay. And then for like the very long term, we have our responsible scaling policy, yep. Which doesn't apply really to these models now, beyond just like we want to have the best security that we can. But like for models that eventually become like much more powerful, like if a model, like none of the models right now could like build a bioweapon or like substantially speed up someone who, like a bad actor that was trying to build a bioweapon. And so for those, we like, it would be premature to like put in place a lot of safety barriers that would like protect against that, but slow down development. And so we don't do that now, but we have a plan for like if next year or 2 years from now, like the models can make bioweapons, we would handle that.
And so that's your responsible AI, your responsible scaling policy.
Exactly.
Right? Which
and that's
is
the third one.
Which is one of your core value, and you're already thinking that the models will be so powerful that you're thinking today about the scaling policies you need to put in place.
Exactly.
But those are not needed as of today yet, you're saying?
Yeah, so the way that we have it is like, there's like, we conceive of it as like AI safety levels.
Yeah.
That's kind of similar to like the global biosafety level standard. And so like, for like, if you want to have like a bio facility that can just like handle like non-dangerous bio stuff, like if it just has, if you're just like doing normal testing of like, I don't know, like an in vitro fertilization clinic or something like that, you have to handle some bio material. That might be like a biosafety level 2 lab, which means like it's like you have to have some level of security on it. But if you have a thing where like you're handling like smallpox or something like that, then that would be like a biosafety level 3 facility, and like you need much more stringent guides for it.
That's fascinating. So you're taking the inspiration from some of what the industry has been doing already.
Exactly, yeah. And so for us, now these models are ASL 2, like AI safety level 2, which is like they're not actually that dangerous. Like even if you removed all of the like safety features and guardrails, like it would be embarrassing maybe, but like no one's gonna get hurt. Which is like is like you're laughing, but like I think that's like a good thing, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also great to hear you thinking about it in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone needs to think about that too, because like if we're not prepared for that, then like the models will be able to make a bioweapon, and then either like a bioweapon will get built, or everyone is going to have to like stop, and like nobody wants either of those things to happen.
Yeah, and that's one of the very important things, which is how do you keep putting those guardrails and security features on at the same time as allowing innovation to progress and solving some of the other issues. So totally hear you on this. The other one I wanted to ask you about, Tom, because I've heard you talk about it in the past, is constitutional AI.
Yeah.
And I don't know if some of you have heard the term constitutional AI before, which is not easy to say when you're French, by the way. But constitutional AI, what is it?
Yeah, so basically constitutional AI is making it easier to take some concrete, like concrete principles that you want the model to follow, and then kind of like bake that into the model's like personality. And so that's the thing that we use to give Claude like the personality and behavior that that it has. And I think that's just a useful thing for the world. And so we have a published paper that kind of explains how we do it and how other people might do similar work.
So if we go to Anthropic website, we can download the paper on constitutional safety.
I think it's a fun read. I think it's like quite readable.
And I'll get some examples of how you do personality. And so I'll go and look that up as soon as we're done with the summit season. And I think going back a little bit in your development, what are some of the technical challenges related to safety and security that you face when you develop AI, and how do you approach it, and maybe give some examples of what you found as you were developing Claude and how you addressed it?
Yeah. Let's see. I think that so I was less engaged in the kind of like the post training efforts that like take kind of the raw language model and then like turn it into like the Claude personality, and so I think like I think like the constitutional AI stuff seems like it's like one big area. We had a pretty large like red teaming effort too, where like we would have various people go and like try to get the model to do bad things, like both bad thing, like both like try to get it to do things like build bioweapons, which generally were prevented because the model's just not smart enough to build bioweapons yet. But we wanted to check, and so like we carefully did like evaluations on that front, and then other red teaming of like can folks like jailbreak the model to get it to do embarrassing stuff, which I think would be more of a risk. Like if you have this as a company, you deploy it to end users, and like you don't want the folks to then like use your model to like write erotica or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's like another kind of like layer of the safety field that we put on.
No, very interesting. I think, policymakers right now are looking into AI as they should, and I think we all believe here that there is a role in that. You're talking about bioweapons, which is a pretty extreme scenario. I think one of the conversation with policymakers right now is also around misinformation or hallucination, right? And I think one of the big things you did on Claude 3 was working on that aspect. How important is that to you, and what are you doing to address it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I think that figuring out how to make the model more trustworthy is just like a super high priority for us, and hallucinations are like one of the biggest things that causes like that means that people can't trust the model, and so figuring out ways to get the model to like appropriately caveat if it doesn't really know something has been a high priority for us. And then also letting the model use more information sources is another one. And so like two different ways that we do that. One is just having a very long context and making sure that the model appropriately remembers everything from its context. So there's like a needle in the haystack eval that folks have and that we did, where we took like a very long book. I forget if it was like Moby Dick or something like that. And then in like one sentence in like the whole book, we added a question, or like we replaced one of the sentences with like a statement on like what our favorite pizza topping is. And then so this model read all of Moby Dick.
Mine is pepperoni, by the way.
Yeah, great. Mine is garlic. So model read like all of Moby Dick, and then we asked it like, hey, was there anything weird about this thing that you just read? And it was like, yeah, there was like this thing about pizza toppings that like doesn't seem like it fits well in this like book about whaling. So like that seemed kind of weird. And this like went slightly viral on Twitter too, where like the model then also was like, like maybe that pizza toppings thing was put there to like test whether or not I was paying attention while I was reading the book.
That's incredible. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. So we talked about policy a little bit, and I know you've been, and some of your other co-founders have been extremely involved in a number of meetings that have been organized around the world. I think the first one that was really big was the White House Voluntary AI Commitments, and then a few months back, we had the UK Safety Summit. Then just last month, I was with one of your other co-founders, Dario, at the G7 and B7 talking about AI. What is your perspective on regulation and what it means in this space?
Yeah. So I think regulation is like definitely coming, and so I think it seems like that's an opportunity to like have to do great good, because I think there are risks like both now and in the future that these models will have, but it's also like a place where like poorly executed regulation could have like a hugely damaging effect on the whole world. And so I think it's super important. I thought the executive order in the United States seemed like quite reasonable, like when I read it. And so yeah, I'd like to see like kind of more stuff like that.
Okay. And so what level do you think is appropriate versus when it would stifle innovation, as you say?
Yeah. Well, so I think the like responsible scaling policy that we put together like that's pretty closely matches with what I think, which is just that like if there's like a real risk like bioweapons or like offensive cyber work, like those things should be guarded against, because like nobody wants like
exactly.
Nobody
plus
wants
you have the rules and you have your core values, but not everybody might have them. So absolutely agree with you. Maybe moving on a little bit from the topic of regulation, even though it's super important. Maybe wanted your view on the recent advancements of conversational AI and its progress there. and whether you think we're approaching a form of artificial general intelligence or general artificial intelligence in whichever way you want to put it. And
Yeah.
what's your view on that? Because it's been extremely interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of think that like I think definitely capabilities have been super like advancing really quickly. Like so when we built GPT-3, like I think that was a big improvement over GPT-2, where like GPT-2 like couldn't count to like 10. So
And Tom, what was the lag of time between 2 and 3?
I think it was like 2 years.
2 years.
Like year and a half to 2 years. We like finished training GPT-3 a little bit before we released it, and so it depends where you count.
Yeah.
Like GPT-2 was like I think like blew people's mind at the time because it could kind of do anything or like it could do something, but like it couldn't really do that much. Like there was like the cool like example that we had where it like told a story about like some unicorns being discovered, and it was like a kind of plausible story like the model could kind of write. But if you asked it like, hey, give me a list of like your top 10 favorite animals, it would like be like, animal number 1 is like frog, animal number 3 something, animal number 4 something, animal number 7 something, animal number 3 again. Like it couldn't count to 10 if it was just trying to like enumerate a list. So like the model was like quite stupid. Like GPT-3 like was like somewhat was like a big leap over that, but like still I don't know. One of the impressive things that we found was that like if you added it to take like 2 3-digit numbers, like add 211 and like 244 or something like that, like it would get that right 80% of the time, which is like like much more impressive than like not being able to count to 10, but like still not that impressive. Like and then GPT-4 another year and a half later, or like Claude Opus, like now these models, Claude 2 could pass like the bar exam. Okay. And so like we've seen like very, very fast improvements there. And I think from that perspective, like I think these modern models are like I think like weak artificial general intelligence already. They're like pretty general. They like have some intelligence, but they're obviously not as smart as a human.
Yeah.
Even if they know a lot more facts than a human does.
Do you think we're at a weak general artificial intelligence stage? And we're moving towards
slightly more every month, yeah.
And so, how do you see Claude fitting in our daily lives now? And
Well, I think it depends on different people. Like I use Claude for all sorts of stuff. Like I don't know. I'm like an engineer by training, but like a lot of my time now is spent on like management or like dealing with like supply chain stuff and like stuff that like I'm totally unqualified to, or like finance stuff, like stuff that I know nothing about basically. And so I found Claude super useful as like a coach for that stuff, where it's like if it's like if I want an opinion from someone who has like read everything about that, like has like all the blog posts, etc., like that is something where like I suddenly have access to that, and like I can trust that like my conversation is gonna like remain private. I'm like not gonna waste this person's time. Like they're happy to help out, and so like me personally, like that's been a huge thing.
Yep.
I think also I still try to spend like as much time as I can doing coding, but like the team has like moved on many things, and like now we'll use languages that like I don't know, or like that I'm not as good as the other folks on the team. And so for things like that too, where like I don't know the best practices or how to use different libraries, just asking the model, because the model like knows all of that too. That's been like a huge accelerator for me.
So you use it as a coach and a personal advisor and a code optimizer and a code teacher, and that's awesome.
Exactly.
Okay, actually, you've given me a few things to think about. You know what? Last time I used Claude was at the beginning of this week to help me fix a speech I was working on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that worked out well. What do you think are some of the most significant use cases that you see right now in the use of Claude? And you're obviously focused on the enterprise and on the business side of Gen AI, right? So What are some of the use cases that you've been impressed by and that you think are very promising and where you see a lot of value for businesses?
I think there's a ton of stuff. I think it's interesting for me to just like hear the like wide breadth of different things that people use for the model. So like I guess like I could talk about like a broad category, and then just like I think there's just like a huge long tail where like one broad category that lots of people use it for is like customer support tickets, where like that's a thing where like there's lots of them, like you need to look over some knowledge base to figure out what the model is actually, or like to get the answer for, and so people will use that to like accelerate their customer support. And so like I think that by itself is like a huge thing. I do think that then the long tail of things looks like, and maybe if I was like to make that a little more abstract, it's like using like retrieval augmented generation RAG on like internal knowledge bases of some sort to like answer questions. Like I think that's like a huge category. I think that like the long tail is more like one like pithy description I heard of like what is business to business SaaS. Like B2B SaaS mostly is like taking a business function and then like that's used across many companies and automating it. So that's like the majority of what B2B SaaS is. And then people will make a whole company to like do that. Okay. But in order for that to happen, you like need this to be like enough companies need to care about this or have the same business practice that it justifies like a whole new company starting up to solve this problem. And so I think one thing that these models do and that we see people using it for is doing business practices that they have that they will now automate, but that like wouldn't justify like a whole new startup outside to like go and tackle it. And so like one cool example just from this week that I heard was there's a customer who basically they want to make sure that they basically sell a physical device, and so that physical device is like in the like listed in the like catalogs of like Best Buy or like the different like electronics stores. And so what they want is to make sure that like their device shows up at the top of that list.
Yep.
And so like what they do is they have the model like every day go and like read the catalogs from all of the different like hardware like stores and see if their product is at the top. And if it's not, they get an email, and then they go and email like Best Buy, and they're like, hey, like I thought we were going to be at the top. And so like it's a very like simple use case. There's like no way that this particular thing would like justify like a whole separate business to do it. But like now that's like that's not wasting a person's time to like read this every day. It's now like an automated business practice.
No, I think this is a great example. And just before getting on stage today, we were discussing with someone and asking us, where we were seeing things going. And I think most of it has still to be invented in the way we use this. And I can't wait to see next year when we come back here some of the new use cases that have been invented and that we don't think about. What's just a side question? What's one of your last prompts that you've written?
Like the most recent prompts,
yeah,
if you
the
like.
most comfortable, or one that you're comfortable sharing. Well, some of my prompts are pretty personal.
Yeah. So I think one that I tragically like don't speak French. And so as I came here, I wanted to ask the model, like, how can I say that I don't speak French yet?
Okay.
And so the model gave me like advice on that, which...
Je ne parle pas encore français.
yeah, je ne sais pas français. Encore.
Encore.
Yeah, thank you. So that at least was like a useful thing that the model helped me with.
So one of the things we just announced this week, or was it the end of last week, an extended partnership between AWS and Anthropic. We obviously... at AWS, we love what you do. Our customers love what you do, and they tell us all the time. What does that partnership mean to you at Anthropic, and why did you enter into it, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think I think that I don't know. I think Amazon is the most customer obsessed company in the world, and so I think that that's like a mutual focus that we have on making sure that our models are useful to the people who use them, and I think also about like building trust over the long term, and so that seemed like a place where like there already was just like a lot of cultural like resonance. And so I think that was like one big reason, and then also like I think like this shows up in like the security of the cloud too. So like AWS I think has the best cloud like among many different axes. One that I think it clearly has it is with security, and like that's like a very fundamental part for us. I mentioned that like ASL 2 has like many fewer requirements than ASL 3. One place that it does have a high requirement is security, where like
security.
we don't want any of this stuff to get stolen, and so that was the thing that was really attractive to us about that.
And I think that's what Milan was sharing this morning, right? And I love the analogy, which is where the internet stops is where S3 begins in terms of using the models, and the fact that you can, through Bedrock, deploy Anthropic in your virtual private cloud, and then at that point, the model is basically your own, and it never gets back to the internet, and your data remains your data, your prompts remain your prompts, your results remain your prompts, and that is so important to our customers right now.
100%.
And I think one of the reasons why so many customers, and thank you all, but go in production using Bedrock and Anthropic right now, and absolutely the security is critical, and plus all of the great work that you've done on cost, right?
Yep.
And the cost equation is extremely important. Good. I think we're coming to the end of our 30 minutes here, Tom. But anything else you wanted, since we're in this beautiful room together? Anything you wanted to share?
Well, I guess I think we've said before, but like right now, folks can use Claude on Bedrock, in regions. Like if you're okay with regions outside of France, I think like as of end of today, you'll be able to use it in France as well. And so like I'm just super excited for you guys to use this and build and to see what you guys put together.
Super low latency using Bedrock in CDG for EUS3, I think is the technical name. I call it CDG. But I think a huge round of applause for everything you do at Anthropic. Thank you, because I think what our customers are doing with your technology is just incredible. And also thank you for the way you're approaching it. I think it's a really refreshing conversation to have in terms of some of the way you look at it and some of the ideas behind constitutional responsibility. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for announcing those things here during the AWS Paris Summit. And hope to see you again in Paris soon. But thanks so much.
Likewise.
Big round of applause.
Thank you, Julien. Thank you all.
Thank you all, and I hope you've been having a good day. And it was great to have Tom and Anthropic on stage with us today. Enjoy the rest, and see you soon. Thank you.